One thing that comes to my mind from this is, outside of the crypto world, is my own experience in like community governed organizations in my life, right? For instance, my credit union is like the largest mortgage lender in the region up in Boulder. It's called Elevations Credit Union, and like I've been to one annual meeting. I've even met with a board member, but like the last thing I would want to do is like participate in decisions about like who should get a mortgage, right? And yet there is still an accountability structure. You know, there's still a sense that that organization is ultimately accountable to members like me, and there are mechanisms for doing that. On the other hand, there are projects like, for instance, I co-founded like a little cooperative social media server some years ago called social.coop. Like, I love going to those meetings because we're doing something new and it's fun, and I feel like I have something real to contribute. So I think about that combination as being a recognition. There's always going to be a topology, and we shouldn't expect a kind of one size fits all for our attention economies.
So I would build on that I think one thing that's often missing in the DAO space is a adequate separation between what is a governance concern and what's an operational concern. And this is important in the attention economy context because frankly, you're asking for the labor, the attention of your community. And if you're asking them to do things that are not actually governance, they're ops. So the difference between making high level decisions about what you're trying to accomplish or appropriating funds, budgeting, and again, if you're doing high level participatory budgeting, but if it's day-to-day operational things, then as long as you've done the work to secure the buy-in, get the goals, relegating some things to an operational layer is actually a way of separating governance attention from ops attention, giving people the opportunity to govern without asking them to operate. And I want to throw this back at Rena because we've talked about quite a bit the ways in which DAOs missing this split make both worse.
What did you say we managed to make?
Ops and governance.
We managed to make both of them worse at one point. How you do that? It's virtually impossible. That is a great point. And we did talk about this, and as well as what you're doing at Block Science, which I found very compelling, which is that tension between the operation side of things and the decisions that should be made within the community. And I don't think there's an answer for it, to be fair. I do think that there's a balance. One thing that you mentioned that you're doing well at Block Science, which I think applies to this, is that there's trust, accountability, will, and skill. And figuring out where those decisions should lie for some of these, I think before just setting up a random framework and a snapshot and a tally vote is really, really useful. And for me, we talked about this as well, a little bit from the type of contributors or the people that you're governing needs to be considered as well. A protocol builder is not going to want to be governed in the same way that somebody's contributing research is. It's very, very different in the incentives, the contributions that they're doing, and then the trust and accountability in terms of what they're shipping.
And I guess to provide a little bit of clarity, so Block Science is a roughly 30-person R&D firm. We've been working in the Web3 space for over 7 years, and somewhat randomly, we were actually a service provider of Gitcoin when it was a company during the time it became a DAO, which was a ride. No, concretely, we ended up even with a lot of people who are very Web3 motivated, and to some of what Nathan was saying, we have a largely sociocratic structure. We have circles, or we call them councils. They are accountable to each other for core business function. There are people who are part of multiple of them. The councils themselves are more governance-like, and then within them you have more operational activity, various activities that produce those business functions, and people within those councils are accountable to each other and up to their group. And at the scale of 30-odd people, it's wonderful, but I also don't recommend that as a scalable method beyond that. We've kept it at the size we have precisely because we like that culture and that style of organization. And so I would be careful about trying to take that model and scale it beyond that, few dozen people.
Yeah, I wanted to add something about the kind of diverse kinds of people that participate in these communities and recognizing that. And for me, one of the questions coming into the study was, we kind of felt what extractive attention economies look like when we're thinking about things like platforms and doom scrolling, and it's kind of addictive, and we just feel like we're being sucked Our attention is being sucked dry. And then, we're in a year of regenerators, right? This ETH Denver. And I think I was trying to figure out what does a regenerative attention economy look like? And it's a question that I'm thinking about. And I think it kind of feels more like permaculture as opposed to like monoculture, where we're being like mined for attention, or strip like the industrial agriculture. It's more like a permaculture where there's many different kinds of contributions, many different kinds of ways of recognizing people's contributions. People feel heard, they feel seen, they feel like they're not wasting their time. I think there's also something about how AI helps with all of this and doesn't destroy all of this, because I think there's also ways that it really does a lot of harm, and we haven't really talked about it at all. But yeah, maybe permaculture attention is kind of what I'm thinking about.
One of the considerations that I have, and I'd be curious from this group as well, is without going into like the what am I version of it, but how do you have a regenerative attention culture when you've got different types of people contributing both internally and externally in an organization, as well as across the ecosystem? And I think that is one of the bigger questions. And you see the fragmentation with a lot of the organizations and the XKYZ, like you've got 13 DAO frameworks and now you got 14. Like, great, fantastic. And again, that drowning in information version of it, because like I said, we this happens personally and professionally. And from like an emotionally intelligent leadership space, like I take care of myself, I take care of my people, I take care of my organization, and I haven't even gotten a chance to see what's happening outside of that. So it's both that attention economy from how leadership has to approach it, as well as the entire organization. And I do think that AI can be a tool, but I've said this a couple times this week, and I'm sure a lot of people are sick of me hearing me bang on about it, but like, that tool has to be the right tool for the use case. And I don't think, based on your heuristics, that we're looking at it in the right way right now.
One word that we bounced around a lot in this process too, and wrestled with, is justice. What is attention justice? And one stream of thought that informed our work was feminist thought around the way in which particularly emotional labor and labor of attention is unequally distributed in many of our communities. And that too is a really critical frame for thinking about what's regenerative. How do you make sure that people are able to be justly rewarded for the attention they're providing, and that their attention is not being exploited?
Yeah, I want to try to click on that, because especially in DAOs, we have a tendency to do this thing where if we can't metricize it, we can't value it. And there's a certain kind of emotional labor, care work, support that even in an environment that's heavily metricized can't actually be metricized, or shouldn't be, or when it is, it often causes more harm than good. And so like making sure that we hold space in our ways of valuing within DAOs for kinds of activities that are in some ways resistant to that instrumentation. And if we insist on certain kinds of instrumentation, then we also insist on devaluing that kind of work.
Well, we're about at the end.